Our next guest is the founder and portfolio director of Shades of Us. She's also directed a couple of films reaching over 1,000 individuals, a storyteller and a communication expert in that regard. Ramatu Ada Ochekliye. Ramatu, good morning and welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me today. Good morning.
It's a pleasure indeed. Now, let's begin with the International Peace Day in terms of the theme for this year's celebration. In your opinion, how apt is it?
It's very important because peace, I would always say, is the bedrock for which any form of development can happen. Let's look at places that do not have peace right now. You can see that there is almost an equal lack of development in those places. So it's very important that we, of course, commemorate the day, but go forward and take action to ensure that we have peaceful societies for the kind of growth and development that we require to be the giant that we are supposedly and to also contribute to global development. So it's very, very apt.
Now the theme in itself is act now for a peaceful world. Now we'll be speaking to the topic justice and accountability as tools for peace. Many believe peace is relative. You've used Nigeria as the case study, and people perceive it from the absence of war. Whilst the country might not be at war currently, there's insecurity here and there, there's a subject of inequality, there's corruption, there's injustice. From your perspective, how do justice and accountability serve as tools to ensure there's lasting peace in Nigeria?
Oh, very, very important. And I always like to use a simple example when I talk about peace, right? If you pick a rat, simple animal, right? Regular, it will run away from predators. Let's say cat in this case, it will run away when there's a problem and it will eat and do what it wants to do, and it's just a regular animal. What happens when you chase that rat to a corner? What happens is that this rat begins to panic. It stresses out. It, wonders what's going to happen next. And at a point, regardless of how big the size of that cat is, the rat has two choices. It's either I die or I fight back. And that's what happens with peace. And just like you said, peace is not the absence of war. It is the absence of stability. Stability more than even war is the issue. And if there is no justice or accountability, what then happens is we get to hear pockets of violence here and there that can now manifest into something bigger. And we can see it in Nigeria. If you grew up in Kaduna, you don't need to know that Kaduna used to be such a peaceful community. And what happened? Because of some level of violence, Kaduna stopped being that peaceful community. Many people moved away from Kaduna as a result. So much so that Kaduna is divided literally by the river Kaduna bridge, and you have on one side a group of people and on another side a group of people. That is that. You go to Plateau and you see the same thing. The lack of peace has divided people. In Lagos, there is growing animosity between two tribes in Lagos, and it's across the country. You go to Benue State, the same thing, growing animosity between tribes. And what does that mean? It's that people begin to run with the idea that there is no justice for me, there is no accountability if things are done to me. And what is beginning to happen? We are beginning to see people are taking up arms, people are fighting for themselves, people are the places where you have pockets of violence that is just gradually increasing until hopefully not it gets to a melting point that becomes really bad. So without justice, without a sense of accountability, people really fear what happens to them, and the one thing they want to do is protect themselves. It's human nature to want to protect yourself or to fight for yourself or to ensure that you survive this thing we call life.
Now, I know you've touched on situations in Kaduna and Benue, but you've worked in communities as a storyteller, as an advocate as well. Have you had any personal real-life experiences of how corruption and injustice in particular have failed the scenarios you just stated?
Again, I lived in Kaduna for a very long time, right? And I saw classic case of, violence happening. And violence can happen. I always like to tell people, because we're people and we have different value systems, we might have moments where we clash. And these things can happen. What should happen afterwards is that there should be not just justice, but justice should have been seen to have been done, right? Say, for example, a community is ravaged by militant men or what have you, and then there is no justice for the people. Justice in this case being maybe, for example, helping bury the dead, providing adequate security to ensure that it doesn't happen. arresting the people who caused that violence, and even making sure that those who survived are receiving medical treatment and what have you. If all of this is not done, what then happens? People begin to fester animosity because they think that there is no justice being done. Let me bring it home again to Abuja here. Recently, we've heard of the case of the one chance and what have you. It has become so rampant, so much so that on a normal day, we know that protecting the citizens lies with the policemen and what have you. But because a lot of people have lost that faith in them, what has begun to happen? Many women have begun to take up protective measures for themselves, including taking, say, pepper sprays for themselves. And recently, I've lived in Abuja for a while, and I never knew that people could have jungle justice. We know that just a few weeks ago, there was a classic case of jungle justice that happened in Abuja for alleged one chance people. That's what happens when there's no accountability. When people think that, okay, something bad is happening and the forces that be are not helping to prevent it, what they now do is they begin to say, okay, it's either I die or I protect myself. And we don't want to get to that point.
Where people begin to resort to taking up laws
because
into
once
their
people
hands.
take up laws into their hands, they themselves become criminals. They themselves become a part of the problem. And with this kind of protection or protecting yourself, what then happens is people get used to taking violence into their hands, and it will only escalate. And we have seen it across the country. Look at again when Boko Haram started. Look at when we had the unknown gunmen. Look at when we had the militancy. All of this is one thing that was not addressed, allowed other people to think, oh, this is okay to do. And then other people felt, you know what, if nobody is going to protect me, I will protect myself. And then we now have a Nigeria where people go out and pray, God, please allow me come back home today, because you never know what will happen on the way. And so we now have a system of such lawlessness that peace, in fact, people are just worried across board because you never know what will happen. People can go and barge into your house. Like I was watching on social media, some guy talked about how armed robbers came into their estate, they came to his house, and the story was so gory. It was scary because he said they had 3 police checkpoints before his estate, and these checkpoints were there to protect his estate. Now imagine him going forward, what his relationship would be like with the police. He talked about how he had to save his family himself, and now he's thinking about getting a gun and registering it, even though laws do not allow for some of these things. And if he realizes that, oh, I cannot register a gun, what is he going to do? He's going to get one and hide it. And then this guy, the slightest problem that happens in his community, he might just shoot somebody, because again, there is no accountability, there's no justice for him, right? And so he feels that for justice to work for him, he has to do it himself, and we don't want to get to that point.
Now, it's very factual that repatriative justice needs to be seen to restore those communities that are warring. But when we look at the issue of security, people talk about it being the primary responsibility of the government. There's law enforcement and the police who are supposed to ensure that these laws that are available are enforced to the latter. But you've talked about this gap, whereas there's now a deficit in trust on the part of the public to the institutions that are saddled with responsibility. It's still the subject of corruption at heart. And this brings me to ask about our tiered system of government. People are debating if Nigeria is now ripe for state policing. The local government continues to grapple with the challenges of even having autonomy in itself. How can corruption at the third tier that is closest to the masses, the local government, affect ordinary people's life, more or less their daily peace?
So there's been so many conversations around state policing, and personally, I do not agree with state policing, because we have seen what has happened even in the slightest instances of, especially with growing tribalism in Nigeria. Tribalism is such a problem in Nigeria. So imagine in one state, you use the powers of the state to try and oppress other people. It becomes a huge problem. So personally, I do not agree with it. It might have its benefits, but for me, it's not the right step to go. But to your question, I think it is important that we have local, again, we have really sidelined our local government, really sidelined them. Most things that are done are happening either at the state level or at the federal level. And even at the state level, security is not at the state, it's not at the power of the governor, it's at the power of the president, right? So it's important that we go back and really look at our tiered system of governance. The reason the local government chairperson is close to you is because you are able to address the things that affect the people who are closest to you. Yes, it's important for us to get some level of security, but I still think that to an extent security should be at the federal level, personally. But let's get a situation where we have peace building. Peace building does not need to have, security, law enforcement and what have you. It's, for example, a traditional ruler or a local government chairperson saying, look, we need to live cohesively with the people in our community. Let's welcome visitors, and visitors respect our culture and traditions and things like that. And you're going on an education policy that helps your people understand the value of peace, the value of development, the value of growth together. Now that can be done at the local level. We also need to ensure that people understand that peace, the absence of peace, has a ripple effect on all of us. How many people have gone to the market recently and tried to get ginger? How many people think about it? Ginger is one of the most expensive things that you can find right now in the market. And why is that so? Because many of the farming communities where ginger is, produced have been ravaged by one form of violence or crisis or attack or the other. If we do not together stand for peace, what then happens is that we lose certain things. And it's not just ginger, it's growth generally. Some influencer went to Taraba State, for example, and was talking about how, Taraba had this beautiful landmass. It had Gembu, the border to Gembu and all of that, and it was beautiful. But without peace, someone from Lagos, from where he left, to go into Taraba or Adamawa State to find Gembu will not be possible because you're worried about all the wrong things that can happen to you. So if we do not have these systems that allow us build peace for each other, what happens is it affects all of us. We do not have, in the north, we do not grow palm trees enough to get palm oil. So we are dependent on the palm oil that comes from the south. In the south, you do not have enough grazing land for you to rear cattle. So you do need the meat that comes from the north. If we are not understanding of the fact that peace is actually togetherness and it's what helps us grow, we will continue to suffer, and we are seeing it today.
Now there's the adage that says delay is not denial.
I disagree.
But when we talk about justice, the concept of delayed justice almost feels like denied justice.
I always say this, and I think I said it even last week. Delayed justice is denial. So take, for example, again, what has happened in Kaduna State. For a long time, there were so many communities that were ravaged by violence. And these communities, almost 25 years right now, would you tell me that with the justice not happening for over 25 years, that it's not a denial of justice? It is a denial of justice. So justice that is delayed is justice that is denied, especially because of the systems that we have, because you cannot trust that the system will still stand for you regardless of the time that has passed. So justice, in my opinion, justice that is delayed is justice that is denied.
Now, it brings to question the place of accountability, because usually when we talk about the process of prosecutions, especially with the workings of the Nigerian legal system, it's quite a lengthy period. You talked about Kaduna, most recently in Benue, where over 200 people were annihilated.
Yes.
Communities now are IDP'd in different IDP camps, even when there is some sort of generosity or empathy from key persons within different circles making donations. The accountability even in what they get, or even the restorative justice in returning them to their communities, seem to stagger through a period. What is your perspective of this? Would I call it a norm? It seems to be the new normal.
It is a norm. And it's not just Benue, again, for one who is from Benue, so it comes very close to home for me, right? But it's not just a norm. It is a problem that we have. And again, it comes back to that conversation you have just mentioned. When it feels like a community has been ravaged, Nothing is done to help rebuild. Nothing is, people who are in the hospital do not have their bills taken care of, or even things like the consumables, that, because beyond bills there are things like consumables, your cotton wool, your band-aids and what have you, are not taken care of. They have nowhere to go back to. They constantly want, school is interrupted, business is interrupted, whatever economic contribution they were making is interrupted. And then when you look at it from the grand scheme of things, they never know whether they can return to their home, to that land, whether that land is ever going to be safe for them. So it becomes a problem where people just, exist. And a lot of these people would exist and will be fine. They will say, okay, you know what, this is the lot that life has dealt me. But there are those who will now begin to get resentment, which is where the problem is. If you do not address the problems, and we saw it with the Niger Delta. There were times when oil was taken, the land was being destroyed, people got angry, the land was destroyed, so their economic activity was affected, and then people were using all forms of violence to keep them in check. And what happened? Militancy grew. It not only grew, but became a global problem for all the people who are drilling. It's the same thing that's happening. So we need to get to that point where we understand that we must treat all instances of grievance. And here I must be very honest. Not every time that someone feels aggrieved, it's not every time that a person feels aggrieved that they are actually aggrieved. Sometimes because of the stories they are told, because of the history that they think
the
they
circles
know,
of violence.
the circles of violence, some things may not be true. But there needs to be mediation. It's why till tomorrow, I hold former Kaduna State Governor McCarthy, I hold him to high esteem, because, in the 2000s when Kaduna really went up in flames and what have you, he was able to bring up all members of society, talk about religious leaders, traditional leaders, community leaders, women leaders, youth leaders, everybody. And he said, how can we resolve this? And he showed an example that was very good, because he not only interacted with people, he went to the communities. Things like bills were paid for people. And then he was like, look, it's not just about saying, oh, we hurt each other. We have to actually say it and be accountable. Oh, this is where I was wrong. This is where this thing was wrong. And for a while in Kaduna almost returned to that very peaceful place that it used to be. And yes, there were still fissures and there was still a lot of sadness. But with peace, if you don't talk about it, if you don't work towards rebuilding the trust that was broken, what will then happen is resentment will continue to grow. And then communities will, the fissures that we have in this country continues to widen. We don't want to get to the point where Rwanda got to, and there were just 2 tribes. Imagine what happens with Nigeria with over 250 tribes that we have. So we need to work together as people, use our leaders, use our activists, advocates, everyone, for every stakeholder needs to be brought on board to address the issue that we have, and which is, how do we ensure peaceful societies so that we can grow, we can develop, and we can contribute to not just national the national stance that we have, but regionally across Africa and the world. We are an amazing people. We just lose so many things in the time we spend not being peaceful.
Now, I like the way you put the ideals of peace building and how vital it is to achieving the peace we so much desire. Yeah. But still talking about the workings of the law, particularly it's also hinged on the institutions. How do we achieve strong institutions so that justice is not only seen to be served, but seen to be justice in its true sense?
Yes. So I don't know what can be done for our justice system, because there's a pile of cases, but I do have a suggestion. One thing I saw during, I think it was the early years of President Buhari's tenure, what we had mobile courts for regular traffic offenses, and these mobile courts were in Wuse, you will find one in Gariki, you find, and they were helping speed up some of these things. The same thing, do you know, if we were able to deploy that for traffic offenses, imagine what happens if we now deploy it for the instances of violence, whether it be violence against individuals in the family setting, or violence, assault in community, or a broader violence which is tribe against tribe, right? So imagine what happens if we have better accountability.
As against jungle justice. So if you find someone culpable, you take them to
them to court. In fact, there's a meme going around right now that in Nigeria, when thieves or armed robbers or whatever are caught, they'll rather be caught by police than be caught by the community. And it should never ever be the case, right? That idea where you are more afraid of the community because you know of the possibility of jungle justice. And jungle justice can only happen when people do not trust our institutions. A lot needs to be done to improve the trust we have in our institutions. Let me give you another example. Recently I was driving and then I stopped at the red light and I saw road safety officers, and all my experience with road safety is they are coming to ask me, where are your papers, do you have fire extinguisher, da, da, da. So I was prepared for that. And this lady walked up to me and said, oh, hi, how are you doing? We're on orientation this morning. Do you know about the things you should do when you want to buy your tires? I was so shocked. And
more like a sensitization,
yes,
and awareness creation.
I was surprised because I'd never had that happen. And because of that, the way she spoke to me, I was so open. I was listening to her. When the light turned green, I was like, kudos to you guys. Do you know that that can be replicated in all our law enforcement agencies? If I know that if I go to the police officer and the police officer is going to allow me, you know, he's going to do things the right way. He doesn't need me to go and give him money to do certain things. Do you know that I will not be willing to commit any jungle justice? And it's not just the police, because the justice system is wide. We have law enforcement, we have the court systems, and the judicial system. And if we do not allow all of these things to work, we would continue to have problems. We watch movies and we see that, oh, you go to court, maybe you're a fan of Boston Legal or something, and you watch it and you're like, oh, you go to court and within days there's judgment and this person has been chosen. And do you know,
it feels like the process is expedited.
A lot of us have not been to America and what have you, but you think that, oh, American justice system is amazing. That's because that's how they've portrayed their justice system to be. Imagine the same thing for Nigeria.
Now, very quickly, we have a little less than 3 minutes. You just touched on one part I was bringing it to. Portrayal of this events, storytelling, seems to be a strength of yours.
Yes.
Could it be deployed as a tool?
Of course. Because
and if so, within the Nigerian perspective, we know we have a booming creative industry. How willing, in your perspective, are the players to come on board to use storytelling to begin to shape these narratives?
So stories, I'll first lay the statement that stories are what lead to violence in the first place. So it makes sense that stories can also lead to peace building. And there are many creatives who are willing to talk about that. There are people who are funding even peace building. I know someone who, in Sudan actually, you know, Sudan right now is in a lot of problems and what have you. What he does is he uses storytelling, works with people, his community, to explain, oh, the fact that we hated each other does not mean we cannot come out of that. And that's the same thing we do. We use our platform as Shades of Us to also do things like that. We talk about why peace is necessary. And again, film is so important. When people watch films, they are able to connect at something that's audio visual. So it's important that creatives, not just creatives, but any storytelling person, the media, what you're doing right now, this time you've spent right here, is for us to say, look, we can be peaceful, we can be loving, we can be respectful. That you are this tribe does not make you any less than a Nigerian. That this tribe is as important as this other tribe. And when we do this, when we're constantly hearing how together we're a better people, we would be able to build peace, you know, build those bridges that help us connect and actually grow as a people.
Well, I must thank you, Ramatu Ada Ochekliye, for making out time to engage and discuss the importance of peace building.
Thank you.